English began its roots in England. However, it is considered as one of the largest official language that is used in many countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. In addition to that, it is widely spoken in many other nations as a sub-language, such as in the Philippines, the Singapore, and India. Despite that, English is broadly used and spoken in many countries. However, the question is, where and how did English derive? So, this paper will explore the journey of the English language, past and present, throughout a timeline where the main objective is to illustrate the development of English from the period of Old English to, to, mo- to modern English. The Middle Ages, or more known as the Dark Era, is a span of time in European history that lasted from the fall of Roman civilization in the 5th century through the Reformation until 15th century. The very first version of English language was acknowledged in England and southern and eastern of Scotland. Later then, it was brought to Great Britain by the Germanic population. As time flows, Scandinavian terminology eventually became established in the vernacular. This is because the Vikings had strengthened their foothold in Britain. Thus, Old Norse had made several changes in its grammatical impact on the language, significantly on the addition of a new set of third plural pronouns, they, them, and their. Old English era then came to an end when it was greatly influenced for a while by a French relative known as Anglo-Norman. Hence, the Middle English was established.
The Elizabethan era was a time period that started between the year 1558 and ended in 1603. It is associated with the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Mary I, who was the monarch of England and Ireland since 1553, had passed away during that time. Therefore, Queen Elizabeth had succeeded the throne. And it is also known as the Golden Age as well as the English Renaissance in English history, as it is the time period during which English literature and poetry bloomed. So, renowned and astounding poets like William Shakespeare and Edmund Spenser were famously known for their writings and related works during this era. Furthermore, this era is highly viewed as an era contrasting to other eras, both past and present. And this was the era in which the Protestant Reformation was successfully established against the Catholic power in regards to the continent. So establishing brief eternal peace between the two parties. And in addition, the battle between the parliament and the monarchy happened during this era. However, the parliament was not strong enough to challenge and protest against the absolute monarchy. So the Renaissance started when the Protestant movement offered to push the Renaissance, meaning having the rebirth of classical art, culture, and literature. Edmund Spenser was born in 1552 and died on January 13th, 1599, in the capital of England, London. He was an English poet, most famously known for his long allegorical poem, The Faerie Queene. It is also known as one of the greatest literary pieces in English history, published in 1590. And his other well-known work is The Shepherd Calendar, which was a poem published in 1579. And Spenser was the son of John Spenser, who was a journeyman and a clothmaker. He grew up in a mid-noble family, making a fortune by raising sheep. And he attended Merchant Taylor's Grammar School, where he would mainly study Latin, Hebrew, Greek, and music. And attending that grammar school, he was pinned as the poor boy because he grew up in a mid-noble family, as mentioned previously. And Later, in May of 1567, he enrolled as a student in Pembroke Hall, now known as the Pembroke College of the University of Cambridge. And in 1573, he received a bachelor's degree in art. However, after that, he stopped attending Cambridge in 1574 due to the epidemic, but sooner later continued his master's later on and received a master's degree in arts in 1576. And in 1578, Spencer got hired as a secretary to John Young, a bishop of Rochester, and through this, he was introduced to the major poets' court. And Spencer admired Philip Sidney, Virgil, and Ovid. His work was influenced by them, and Homer. However, his work diverged as he wrote powerful archaic poetry to match Chaucer. He was admired by all Romantic poets, and he was referred to as poet's poet by Charles Lamb. So The Faerie Queene was published in 1590. It is an allegorical romance which symbolizes the moral and spiritual journey of an individual through numerous temptations of sins towards the ultimate attainment of glory and truth. And the red cross represents holiness in the poem. And there are three values of the English society, which is holiness, temperance, and chastity. And The Faerie Queene was not only written as a celebration of England, but it was also a celebration of the Protestant faith. The Faerie Queene was also known to be written in Spenser in stanza. It is a poetic form created by Spenser himself to be able to create a suitable and easy tool for the long narrative poem. And the Spenserian stanza finds its origin in the Italian Ottava Rima, the Shepherd Calendar. So the Faerie Queene may have been Spenser's most famous work. However, the Shepherd Calendar was published a lot earlier, 1579, and the Faerie Queene was published in 1590. So it is still, however, it's still one of his best and most well-known works, despite it being one of his early works. And Spenser, for this work, he was inspired by Virgil's Eclogues. For this work, he deliberately made his work archaic to match Chaucer's writing style, and he purposely made Colin Clout, which is the main character in the work, to match with Chaucer. So the character Eliza represents Queen Elizabeth, and the story talks about the abuse of the church, Colin Clout's shattered love between him and Rosalind, the praise of the Queen, as well as Shepherd's life in general. And the work depicts the life of Shepherd through the various months. So it is a pastoral allegory in the form of dialogues, and the term sarcasm was also introduced in this work. So in the month of January, the book introduces Rosalind and describes the unhappy love between Colin Clout and Rosalind, as she's unable and does not reciprocate the love back for Clout. And during the month of April and May, the story tells about the rival pastures of the reformer shepherd, and the month ends with an animal fable. And then the summer season contains a discourse on Puritan theology, and during the month of October, it contains a discussion on the life of shepherd during various seasons. However, the main character, Colin Clout, only appears in the month of June and December.
Of course, when speaking about the Elizabethan era, we should mention one of the most renowned English writers and poets in history, which is William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare's journey began in April 23rd, 1564, Stratford-Avon, England. Although there is no existing documentation of Shakespeare's education background, English historians suggest that he probably did pursue early education. However, instead of pursuing higher education, Shakespeare settled down at the age of 18, marrying his wife Anne Hathaway, and went on to have 3 children. By 1594, he was an important member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, who were the leading theatre company in that period. Throughout Shakespeare's career, he had written a variety of works of different genres that were made into plays and are still studied and showcased in current modern literature and theatre. Generally, Shakespeare's work can be categorized into three genres: romantic comedies, histories, and tragedies. This section will discuss two genres which Shakespeare is most known for, which are romantic comedies and tragedies, including one significant work of Shakespeare for each genre. Although Shakespeare is most famous for producing works of the tragedy genre, his earlier works were more focused on comedy romance. One of his most successful romantic comedies was The Two Gentlemen of Verona, which include elements of friendship, love and infatuation, betrayal, and forgiveness. Shakespeare's works of comedy often include happy endings and abundance of witty conversations between characters. Therefore, it is no surprise that The Two Gentlemen of Verona was written with an abundance of flashy, clever wordplays, puns, epigrams, and figures of speech. Examples of memorable quotes from the work include, "For he was more than overshoes in love." Proteus Act 1, Scene 1. "His years but young, but his experience old, his head unmellowed, but his judgment ripe." Valentine, Act 2, Scene 4. From some of these examples, it can be examined that Shakespeare's presence in the English language can be felt, as there are similarities in the figure of speech used in modern English. As a metaphor, overshoes in love is synonymous with the modern English idiom head over heels. Being one of the most memorable works of Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet is a staple part of the process of learning the history of English language. Some of the themes included in Romeo and Juliet are love, familial obligations, conflict, revenge, and death. Shakespeare's playwriting is well known for its clever use of soliloquy, which is a tool used for characters to show audiences their inner thoughts. Romeo and Juliet in particular contain a number of notable soliloquies that elegantly convey the thoughts of admiration and love that Romeo and Juliet have for each other. Examples of one of the most iconic soliloquies from Romeo and Juliet include the famous balcony scene where Romeo describes Juliet's beauty. "But soft what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that though her maid are far more fair than she, that I might touch that cheek." Act 2, Scene 2. During the mid-14th century until the mid-17th century, the English language began to change drastically due to the Great Vowel Shift. The way vowels were said shifted to be pronounced more towards the front position of the mouth, which made vowels sound much shorter than they were originally pronounced. The Great Vowel Shift can be simplified into three stages. The first stage of the Great Vowel Shift occurred in the change of saying the letter I and U. The letter I was originally pronounced as E or E, like in B. Therefore, words such as lie would be pronounced as la-e. On the other hand, the letter U was pronounced as U, right as in root. So, for example, words like cup would be said as coop. On the 15th century onwards, I's and U's were pronounced differently, as I was pronounced as I, like in laid, while U was pronounced as ow, like in house. The second stage involves the letter E and O. The letter E was pronounced as A, such as say, so the word head would be said as heid, rhyming the word braid. With the addition of R next to the letter E, the is emphasized as air, as for example, the word mercy would be said as marcy. Additionally, the letter O sounded more rounder and deeper compared to modern English. Words with the letter O were said with sounds of U or A. Therefore, words such as come and mouse would be pronounced respectively as kum and mahus. When words containing letters O and R, the word is pronounced with a longer U sound, so sword would be pronounced as sword. The letter E is presently pronounced as the original pronunciation of I, which is E, and may also be pronounced as the word et, like in head or bed. The letter O, on the other hand, is now pronounced with an open shape and is shorter, such as dog, soap, or go. The third stage involves the letter A. In Elizabethan English, short A's in words such as rat was pronounced about the same in modern English. However, the A was prolonged as rat. Additionally, short A's were also pronounced flatly, as in pant, and the words like father would rhyme with the word rather. On the other hand, long A's sounded similar to thus Words such as rake, bake would be said as rake or bake. Modern English A's is pronounced as a front vowel, similar to when saying a, like in dart or cart, and later shifted to also being pronounced as as in bears or stairs.
So consonants, in the English language, there are 21 consonant letters, and there are 24 consonant sounds. And the letter Y can sometimes function as a vowel. So for example, in the word myth, or dry, so therefore it is often referred, Y is often referred to as a semi-vowel. And the definition of consonant in terms of like the pronunciation is that the articulators touch or are very close to one another when making a sound. So the articulators are the tongue, the lips, the teeth, and the hard and soft palates. There are many cases in which voiceless fricatives began to pronounce like the letter F sound, like in laugh, which is spelled Laugh, and cough. There's also the letter L between vowels and consonants, like half, walk, talk, and folk. So therefore, like, while the modern English speakers are able to read Chaucer's Middle English, the pronunciation would have been almost completely incomprehensible to modern people. And although Shakespeare and his contemporaries during the late 16th century would have been accented but quite understandable, as Shakespeare's contemporaries had more in common with the current language today than it does with the language of Chaucer. So during the early modern era, there was an increase in the use of double consonants to mark the preceding short vowels. So for example, like sitting, dragging, brilliant, embarrass, exaggerate. So the rule is that in a word with one syllable, doubling the final consonant can only be applied if the word ends in one vowel or one consonant. And in a word with two or more syllables, doubling the final consonant can only apply if the word ends in one vowel and one consonant. As well as the final syllable, it must be stressed, but WX or Y does not count as a consonant at the end of a vowel. Accents. So accents and the pronunciations would have varied a lot regardless of where you're from. So what is for certain is that especially during the in Britain, there is a certain during the era of the Elizabethan era, there is a rhotic accent. So in phonetics, it is relating to or having an accent or dialect in English in which the R sound is maintained before consonants and at the end of a word. So there are divisions in English between rhotic and non-rhotic accents, which makes it distinguishable based on one's pronunciations or lack of the R sound. So non-rhetoric accents became a thing after the 1800s and began in the early 19th century during the time of the American Revolution. So both the British and the American soldiers spoke in a rhotic accent. And in phonology, Chaucer's Middle English vocabulary would be fairly more recognizable to a modern English reader, while Old English vocabulary would be more obscure. And English during this era had dialects, and these dialects are precursors to the regional dialects of modern British English. For example, there's a difference between somebody who's from the southern, let's say London, right? Somebody from the southern of London and the northern part of London, let's say to pronounce the word day. There will be a difference between the accent from someone from the south and from someone from the north. So, and this existed even in Old English.
Grammar can be branched into two different categories. The first one is syntax, which looks at the order of words in sentences, and second is morphology, which looks at the word structure. Syntax in Elizabethan English, like modern English, also followed the simple pattern of subject, verb, object when constructing a sentence. However, Elizabethan English speakers often play with the arrangements of words and were not strict on word orders, making Elizabethan English much more complex than modern English. The use of words were especially flexible when constructing sentences. The writer Shakespeare, for example, would take the liberty in switching the order of words by placing the object before the verb. Therefore, sentences such as Alice drank tea would become Alice tea drank. Furthermore, sentences could also follow patterns such as object, subject, verb. So examples of such pattern being used can be seen in Shakespeare's work when representing colloquial speech when transiting between sentences to place emphasis on the verb of a clause. In terms of morphology, past tenses in Elizabethan era was similar to modern English, as the suffix ed or en are used to represent the past, only that the pronunciation of words with suffix ed would be said with emphasis of ed. Thus, for example, locked would be said as locked. Other than tenses, plurals of nouns like modern English were represented with the suffix of s as well as en. Therefore, words such as house would be pronounced as houses or housen in plural form.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Faatihah, metric number 2025372, and I will be presenting on the English literature in modern 21st century era. The factors that contributes to the evolution of the English language in the 21st century includes technological advancement. With the rise of innovations in technology, it further affects the advancement from various other aspects, especially education. The technological advancement has specifically established a lot of new other disciplines and facilitate the journey of learning. This results in the expansion of creativity among learners and even educators to freely express their ideas and creative thinking. When authors and illustrators have the accessibility to expand their creativity in work, it can spike up the interest among readers, making them more invested in the English language. The results that can be seen from the factors that contributes to the advancement of English language is the inclusion of drawings and images as well as illustrations in the English literature, and these can be categorized into two different classifications, and the first is by illustration and the second one is by fictional. The literary works that includes illustration in the book are graphic novels, illustrated novels, manga, doodle fiction, and GD fiction. Meanwhile, the books that revolves around fictional genre is flash fiction, speculative fiction, and chick lit. As a conclusion, the journey of the English language can be clearly seen as a progressive language with time and technological advancement. The trends and influence of many other literature works from other foreign countries and cultures has also influenced the evolution of English literature. Regardless, the journey of the English language from past to present can be seen to experience various improvements that are more convenient to be used globally as the standard universal language.